In the name of Cinco de Mayo, I declare that it's Latin American history time. So this is going to be just a kind of a short intro to Latin American independence and many of their wars. They fight for independence in general. So to understand Latin American independence, as with everything else, you basically have to understand historical context. So we have the ideas of the European Enlightenment. Those don't just stay in Europe, they spread beyond Europe. So the ideas of the European Enlightenment include ideas of equality, which, given the caste system throughout Latin America, poses a really significant challenge. You have the American Revolution. The United States of America is a very different society than what you see throughout most of Latin America, but it does show that a determined group of colonists can overthrow the mother country. It can be done. Then you've got the French Revolution. So this is a revolution that's fought under the slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Now, on the one hand, the Creole elite that are in Latin America, they reject the whole idea of regicide at first, the execution of monarchs. And they don't like the idea of social equality because, remember, they kind of have second place in the whole grand hierarchy. But the French Revolution is incredibly influential for a whole host of reasons. And then we have the Haitian Revolution, more on that in just a second, but basically the Haitian Revolution provides a model of what not to do. So remember that the vast majority of Latin America is controlled by either the Spanish or the Portuguese empires, have been since the days of Columbus. Then in 1807, basically Napoleon's his way through the Iberian Peninsula, takes over Spain and a good chunk of Portugal, and this actually cuts off Spain's colonies with their basically their governments. And so the question is the Spanish Empire really an empire anymore if they can't actually defend themselves? Is the Spanish government still the legitimate overlord of Latin America? So, little refresher, remember that you have the peninsulares that are sort of at the top of the social hierarchy. These are Iberians who are born in Europe and then later immigrate to the colonies. Then you have the Creoles who are by the way, pronunciation is always suspect. These are white Europeans who are born in the colonies and not born in Europe, and that sort of makes them they're seen as sort of like almost backwoods rednecks by the Peninsulares class. So the Creoles class, however, is much larger than the Peninsulares class, which, if you think about it, kind of stands to reason. And they're increasingly middle class and becoming very well read. And they're interested in some of the ideas on the French Revolution. Again, they're not interested in the idea of social equality because that disadvantages them. But what they are interested in is, well, ideas like political independence from the mother country. Ultimately, resentment in the Creoles class with the Peninsulares and with the Spanish government in general will cause the Creoles to basically form common cause with the other social classes throughout Latin America. And by 1824, all of Spanish South America will basically declare its independence and establish republics. Then in 1898, the last vestiges of Spain's empire in the New World, Cuba and Puerto Rico, are basically either annexed or become independent by force, and that force is provided by the United States of America. So we've talked about the American Revolution, we've talked about the French Revolution. There's actually a third revolution that in Latin America is just as important, and that is the Haitian Revolution, or the Revolution of Saint-Domingue. So Haiti, as it was called, was originally Saint-Domingue, which was a French Caribbean island colony for sugar plantations. So if you want sort of an example of the worst kinds of barbarism imaginable, then you could probably select Saint-Domingue as a pretty good example of that. So 90% of the population of Saint-Domingue were black slaves, and almost all of them worked on sugar plantations. The only free blacks on the island were usually mixed race mulattoes. So basically, the way it works is that you have the following social classes. You have the European planters at the top. Um, you also sometimes have their sort of managers, the people who manage their plantations, because oftentimes the European planters would still be in Europe and they would delegate their responsibilities to many of these kind of plantation managers. Then you had another class, and this was called a group called the Gens de Couleur. These were mixed race landowners who are increasingly resentful of the social system. And then finally, you have black slaves at the bottom of this social pyramid. So remember, 1789, the French Revolution hits, and slowly but surely, knowledge of the French Revolution spreads throughout the world, including the colony of Saint-Domingue. Now, many of the European planters on the island see the French Revolution as an opportunity to basically become independent and be free from all of these mercantilist policies that were sort of eating into their bottom lines. However, the other social classes, like the gens de couleur, as well as black slaves, well, they find the social equality of the French Revolution much more enticing, because the French Revolution says that, you're not supposed to be treated crap on account of race, at least in theory. Now, in 1791, Haitian slaves basically take advantage of the fact that France is a hot mess, and they rebel against their French masters in the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution is led by a very charismatic free slave by the name of Toussaint L'Ouverture, which, again, my French pronunciation is incredibly suspect. And slowly but surely, the island is basically captured by Toussaint and his slave army. Now, eventually, Napoleon comes into power. And remember, Napoleon is not really interested in the revolutionary ideas of France as much. He's more of a nationalist. And in his mind, the lost revenue from Haiti is a huge problem for France. So the French send an army to basically reoccupy the island. Toussaint is captured, but the French army is basically decimated by yellow fever, and they're forced to retreat. So basically, the Haitian Revolution has lost its charismatic leader. And France has basically lost Haiti permanently as a result of this. So in 1804, Haiti declares its independence. This is the first incident in the world where black slaves successfully and permanently rebelled against their enslavers. But there is an ominous postscript here. So, remember, in 1804, the French army retreats, and the Haitian Revolution is under new leadership now. So, some of the military commanders who replaced Toussaint L'Ouverture order a massacre of the white population of Haiti, slave owners, non-slave owners alike. Not only does this remind us that revolutions can be incredibly violent affairs, this also tells us something else. Or rather, it tells slave owners something else. So remember that during the Enlightenment, it wasn't uncommon to find intellectuals and even slave owners themselves who would admit that slavery was on its way out for economic reasons, for political reasons, etc. But what the Haitian Revolution told many of those slave owners is this is what abolition looks like. If you allow for the abolishment of slavery, there's going to be a massive slave rebellion, and the slaves will basically kill the white population in their sleep. That sounds like an exaggeration, and it definitely is, but this is one of the reasons why in the American South, you see Southerners that seem to be so attached to slavery. It's not just about the importance of slavery to the economy. It's not just about the importance of the social system to one's ego and self-perception. It's also about the incorrect assumption that the abolition of slavery here means that the abolition of slavery everywhere will result in the extermination of former slave owners. The Spanish Empire in the New World really starts collapsing basically at the place where it all really began, Mexico. So in 1810, there is a Catholic priest by the name of Miguel Hidalgo, who is from the Creole class, who urges mestizos and Native Americans to join in a rebellion against the Spanish. Now, at first, the Creole class are all about this because, again, they see Father Hidalgo as a way to basically gain independence from Spain. But then Hidalgo and his followers start talking about crazy ideas like social equality and the elimination of the old class system. And at that point, the Creoles start pulling their support from Hidalgo, and Hidalgo and his group, mostly Native Americans and mestizos at this point, they start launching, attacks on Spanish mines and plantations that were sort of, using coerced labor. And at that point, around 1811, Hidalgo captures and executes, the Creoles capture and execute Hidalgo. So that's the end of Hidalgo, but as it turns out, that doesn't really matter because Hidalgo is just a symbol of an idea. The idea that Mexico can be independent and that Mexico can have a society based upon egalitarianism, based upon equality. So the Spanish army spends the huge part of the next decade basically going after the followers of Hidalgo. And one of those military commanders that they task with doing that is a general by the name of Agustin de Iturbide. So he is basically charged with going after the rebellion, but he ends up actually joining it. This is the surprise ending of Star Wars Episode 4, where not only does Darth Vader allow Luke Skywalker, spoiler, to blow up the Death Star, but he ends up joining him. So Agustin de Iturbide basically commands the army to basically side with the rebels. Mexico declares its independence, and it becomes the Mexican Empire. And for his trouble, Iturbide is named the Emperor of Mexico. Iturbide was sort of the compromise candidate because, he was a member of the Creoles class. So on the one hand, conservatives liked Iturbide because he had the army under his command and he was seen as somebody who was interested in an independent Mexico, but not interested in implementing many of the reforms of Hidalgo. The problem is that he joined a rebellion that was explicitly on the side of Hidalgo and his ideas, and so eventually Iturbide is overthrown by the army, but rather liberals in the army, and actually executed. And at this point, the Republic of Mexico is created. So even though Central American states are included in the Empire of Mexico, by 1838, this leads to the division of Central American states into independent nations. And that starts the ball rolling on Latin American independence. We will pick up with this next time.